Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Read T-Foss, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called The Answer to Our Question, written by AridSandstorm. Aboard the human vessel, Palatos. You must be the delegate from Rimworld Federation. On behalf of the Solar Republic, I welcome you. I'm Tanya Fergushov, Assistant to Xeno Affairs Director Louis Falk. Gufrit examined the creatures that greeted him. 2 arms, 2 legs, with hair only atop its head, and a long, skinny tail that extended from above its posterior. His documents allowed him to identify this as a female of the species, but it hadn't informed him of the tail, or the 2 triangular ears atop her head that flicked when he spoke. Thank you for greeting me. As always, he found himself thanking the makers of translator technology. Otherwise, there would be no way that he would be able to have even pronounced her name. The truly surprising thing, however, was that the Republic had already had their own translators with pre-made language packs. My name is Gufrit, and as you stated, I am the delegate sent from the Rimworld Federation to conduct first contact negotiations with your species. He examined his surroundings after the introduction. Around him were drab industrial grey walls, with support beams accompanying cables up the walls and across the ceiling. Nearby 2 shuttles sat silent, ready to launch, while a third was further into the hangar, in a state of disassembly, with a number of bipedal creatures working on and around it. Gufrit noted that what looked to be robots supplemented the organic workforce. Strangely, however, they seemed to be treated as equals by the Republic workers. Closer to him, behind and to the left of Tanya, stood an armored Republic soldier. The soldier had 2 horns extending backwards from their side of his head and eyes that looked like vertical slits, while Tanya's looked like orbs. Over what looked to be a body-hugging black suit, he had plates of an alloy Gufrit couldn't recognize that were a solid grain coloring. The only weapon the delegates could see was what looked to be a sidearm mounted slightly above where the creature's right leg met their torso. Glancing back at his own guard, he was met with the familiar 3-legged stance of his species. The familiar exoskeleton frame hidden behind the purple armor of the ceremonial guard, with a head consisting of a mandibled mouth and 4 small compound eyes. Sheathed on his back, but within easy reach of his 2 3-fingered arms, was the ceremonial but functional blade of the god. If you would kindly follow me, Gufrit refocused on Tanya, noticing that her mouth was turned upward in what he assumed to be a friendly gesture. I'll take you to the conference room where the director is. Gufrit indicated acknowledgement with a clack of his mandibles, but quickly followed it up with a, if you would. Nodding, the woman turned and began to walk towards one of the many exits from this hangar bay. As they approached the exit, Gufrit caught sight of 2 of the maintenance personnel as they crossed the delegation's path on the way to the partially disassembled shuttle. What he saw made Gufrit hiss in confusion. Green, scaled skin, long snout with sharp teeth sticking out from it, a long scaled tail coming out from his jumpsuit-covered torso. That wasn't in the familiarization document. From what the initial contact team spoke, we should be the first aliens these people have met, so why? Next to the strange creature was a male of a species that fully resembled the description in the documents. He looked like Tanya, yet without the tail, and his only ears were small, nearly oval things on the sides of his head. A human, by what the document said they called themselves. A quick, concentrated glance before exiting the hangar revealed that while the normal species that had been depicted in the documents outnumbered the total of the other species, there were a half-dozen types of those others. Through the hallway they walked, Gufrit beside Tanya, while their guards trailed their respective charges. Like the hangar, the hallway was a monotone grey, the only color difference being the white markings that would help to lead crew around the vessel. They passed many different creatures going down the hallway, tails with long fur accompanied by pointy ears, round ears accompanied by tails that resembled bushes, horns and backward bent legs, a robot dressed in what looked to be a naval uniform. Here you go, Tanya announced, finally stopping at the door that looked just like all the other doors in this vessel. Gufrit presumed the white markings next to the door labeled it as a conference room that Tanya spoke of earlier. Opening the door, Tanya went through first and immediately stepped to the side, allowing Gufruit to follow her in. "Director Volk," Tanya began, speaking to the normal human sitting at the far side of the wooden conference table. "I brought along Delegate Gufruit, as requested." In stark contrast to the rest of the vessel, the walls and ceiling of this room was a glossed white, while the floor was a type of wood that was lighter in color than the table. In front of Gufruit, on his side of the table, was a grey chair that stood out from the room. It was made in regards to his anatomy, a fact that made Gufruit look at Falk and hiss confusion.
"Thank you, Tanya."
Falk stared, the assistant nodding to his words.
"Please, Delegate Gufruit, have a seat.
We've had our people design and 3D print that chair based on what the documents you sent us described about your physiology." "I see," Gufruit said. "Thank you for your consideration." Sitting down, Gufruit was pleasantly surprised to find that the chair was a perfect fit, and he was able to settle down comfortably. His attention was grabbed by Tanya walking to the other side of the room. Well, it isn't grabbed by Tanya exactly, but rather by the soldier that was following Tanya. He was sure that it was the same soldier that had met them in the hangar, but now the armor plates he wore were a white instead of a grey they were.
"So,"
Falk asked with a smile,
"how's the seat?"
Gufruit looked back at the human and nodded. "It is perfect. I am amazed at both your craftsman's abilities and how fast your soldiers can change their armor to match their surroundings." A subtle dig. He wanted to know how the color of the armor changed. Did the soldier really just change that quickly? He could have waited until after the meeting and asked his own guard what he saw, but his curiosity was getting the best of him. Falk raised one of the patches of hair above his eyes and looked back at the soldier while humming, He then looked back at Gufruit with a smile.
"Oh, you mean the adaptive camouflage? Yeah, it's a system that allows their armor to recolor the plates to better match the surrounding environment."
Gufruit saw his eyes look past Gufruit, presumably at the ceremonial guard that the delegate brought.
"Does your Federation not have anything similar?"
Gufruit struggled to keep his surprise hidden. "I'm glad he can't read my expressions." "We are currently looking into that technology," he lied. "We will be when I get back to the ship and tell home of this." Falk steepled his fingers and smiled.
"I see. Now,"
he set his hands against the table,
"before we begin, Pelotas informed me that you seem to be curious of my crew. So why don't we start with a brief history of our different species?"
"Pelotas?" Gufruit questioned. Unless one of the maintenance crew in the hangar had rushed to inform him, the only delegation staff Gufruit had seen was Tanya and the soldier. With a flash of light, the figure of a human, roughly a foot tall, appeared on the table. A yellow hologram had an androgynous figure and wore a simplistic jumpsuit. It bowed to Gufruit.
"Greetings. I am Pelotas, the artificial intelligence imprinted in this vessel."
"I see," Gufruit replied. This was the first he had seen an AI. The idea had been explored by the Federation, but had been shelved every time for fear of a runaway incident, where the AI got ever smarter and decided to rebel against its creators.
"Your behavior in my hangar bay H-14 indicated curiosity of the members of humanity," the AI stated.
"Ah, yes," Gufruit stated, unsteadily. "I had been informed that humanity hadn't yet met any other species, and yet there's so many different species on the ship."
"Let me correct you on something," Falk said. "Everyone on the ship is human. But our documents were incomplete. Your first team had looked at our first team, which just happened to consist of 2 sapiens, and made the assumption that that's what all humanity looked like."
"Then how?"
"Genetic manipulation," Falk stated.
Gufruit's surprise would have been visible to a brick. Genetic manipulation was a technology that was far from the reaches of the Federation. "You created different species?" Gufruit asked.
Falk nodded before leaning back in his chair. "Humanity has been alone for a long, long time, Delegate. When we finally broke free of our home system, we went from star to star in desperate attempts to answer our biggest question. Are we alone? Empty system after empty system were searched. Finally, when the dread of the apparent answer nearly crumbled our burgeoning civilization, we decided to look inward. If we couldn't find other life, we'd make it ourselves. Years of research culminated in the hybridization of the human genome with those of other creatures of our homeworld. Volk motioned to Tanya. It began with cats and dogs, animals that were companions of humans since before our recorded history. Then we branched from there. However, they were still decidedly human, so we turned to the artificial. We had already made a simple AIs, but we now wanted more. We wanted them to be like us. And so, after decades of research and programming, we made the robotic people, the Andros, as well as sophisticated AI like Pelotos here. We did all this while continuing to map the stars. Gufrit began to sense something strange with Director Volk's story. If they had been exploring space for all this time, then how had they not run into the Federation already? The humans only owned a dozen systems in this sector of space, after all. It was almost as if, It appears the delegate has realized the truth, the AI, Pelotos announced, clasping its hands behind its back. You spoke too much, Director, Tanya admonished with a sigh and an annoyed flick of her tail.
Ah, my apologies, Volk replied, chuckling and rubbing the back of his head. Was just so excited, after all. Just wait until those anti-junk consulmen on Terra hear of this. None of the human worlds were named Terra. Gufrit began. He was glad that he was sitting as he felt his legs get weak. You're not.
We're not from this galaxy, Delegate Gufrit, Volk stated, robbing Gufrit of the words he was trying to say.
For millennia we were alone, a galaxy's wealth in our holds, but with empty hearts and bored minds. But now we've finally met you. The answer to our question.
End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Drexzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.